I intend to replace the shock mounts on this Eames Herman Miller fiberglass chair. Before I get started though, I always like to give myself a set of reference lines so that it makes it easier for me to line up when I actually put the new mounts on. So what I like to do is, and I only do this on the front two mounts, I'll take this piece of metal, it's about 3/4 of an inch wide, and I'll look at exactly where the old shock mount ended. And I'm going to place my piece of metal at that point, not where the edge of the glue is, but to where the edge of the shock mount originally was. And I'm just going to draw a pencil line. And I'll also do it again here. And then I'll come over here and do it. And here. And again, this is just another reference tool for the final reassembly. I'm of the school that likes to remove some of the big chunks with a mallet and chisel before I actually go to sand the surface. If one is very careful and the chisel is nice and sharp, you should be able to flick this off without losing too much of the fiberglass down below. Here some fiberglass was lost just when the shock mount actually came loose. But if you feel it, it's just the surface. A lot of the glass is still intact, and that'll smooth over when I sand it. So this is just a carpenter's chisel and a mallet, and I'm just going to come right up and flick these little edges right off. There's no need to be aggressive. It's an old dried out material, and it tends to break away pretty easy. Now, what sometimes happens, and I definitely have it here, I actually have a little bit of rubber left over from the original shock mount, and then little high spots of the old glue that conform to the back of the original shock mount. So I like to make sure I get all that off before I go at with the sander. Any of the rubbery material may clog up the sanding paper, which is can be costly to keep replacing sheets of sandpaper. Okay, this one looks good. I'll move on to the next one. I'm going to mask off the areas that I choose to sand. And I'm going to eclipse the original glue spot by 1/4 to 1/2 inch. And be generous with the tape. Don't use tiny little pieces. Make sure there's good overlap because you'll be sanding part of the tape. Now I'm going to put a second layer on, but I'm going to move back about 1/2 inch. This will provide some reinforcement for the first layer. Whenever you tape, pretend it's the last thing you're ever going to do. Really push it down tight. Okay, that's it. Now, for a job like this, I prefer to use a premium brand tape like the Scotch 3M tape. is you'll see it's a little more durable, a little tougher, and that aids in the sanding process. You know, not all jobs require a premium tape, but this one certainly does, so to me it's always worth spending the extra buck or two. Now, I don't want to sand any more than I have to, so I've made myself a template, and I'm going to use it and cut a line just with a masking tape. This is just a piece of aluminum. You could use galvanized steel or whatever. And I'm just going to cut the masking tape out around the location where the original shock mount was. So I'm going to now lift off this tape, and I have a perfect area to sand, and this will prevent me from going too far out of bounds to where I might have to resurface the rest of the chair. Much of what I've sanded off here will be covered with the glue. You can always touch up with a little sealer later what you've missed. So go on to the next one. And here we go, removing the tape on the last shock mount area. Okay, now it's time to sand, so let me go ahead and put on the sander and the dust collector. It's going to be a little bit noisy with the dust collector, but it's important to have it. You know, none of these dusts are particularly a pleasant thing to breathe. They recommend a dust mask and to use a dust collector whenever possible. Okay, I'm ready to sand, so I'm going to actually clamp my chair down to the stool. I like to work on a stool, by the way, just a padded, simple stool. It's a good working height for me, and it's easy to clamp to and keep the chair itself level. And that should take care of that. Let me turn on the dust collector. Accomplished. Let me pull off my tape, see what I have left. Okay, so that takes care of the tape. Let me get a clean cloth. Wipe off some of the dust and see what I'm left with here. Okay, the tape left a little residue. And all this will clean off nicely with a little acetone. Here looks like there's a little bit of glue that I missed. So let me just take my chisel and scratch it off. Alright, now I'm going to just wipe it down with a little acetone. The thing to consider when you're working with acetone is it requires the use of a heavy-duty latex glove. Many of the other chemicals will allow you to use just simple nitrile gloves, but acetone is different and it requires a latex glove. So make sure that you have a glove that is appropriate for acetone before you use it. And I'm just going to use, these are little rags. I use them once and throw them away. And I'm just going to wipe down the area. Get rid of any adhesive or other dirt that may be there that may stand in the way of a good bond with the new shock mount. You can see some of that whiteness from sanding is disappears because I'm actually pulling all the fine bits of dust out of there. And it makes for a pretty nice blend back into the plastic, the rest of the plastic surface. And yes, I can come back here afterwards and touch up anything that may still show with an appropriate sealer. Okay, that takes care of the acetone. Okay, this is the base that I'm going to use to install the shock mounts to my chair. But before I go ahead and attach the shock mounts to the base, I need to prepare them first. These are the shock mounts that I'll be using. I get them from Special K Products. They're on eBay. I think it's all one word, Special K Products. They're about $5 a piece, and I've been using them for a while now, and they seem to be a good product. Occasionally, what I'll find is that when they put this final surface on the back side of the shock mount, they actually break through into the hole for the fastener. So what I like to do is I like to dam that off. I don't want to risk any epoxy coming into the area where this fastener needs to go. So this one's obvious. Sometimes it's just a little pinhole, so I recommend that you just hold them up to the light. And if you see any light come through, this one has just a little tiny bit of light coming through. This one looks good, solid surface. Oh, solid surface there. So just these two, I'm going to put a little dam in there. So what I use is just a thick piece of cardboard, not corrugated, but a regular chipboard they call it, and a simple leather punch, 3/16 of an inch. And it's not the hole I'm after, it's what comes out of the hole, like the donut hole. So I'll take my little pieces and I will put it in the threaded side, and then I'll use one of the fasteners that comes with it and push it to the other end. And just put your finger over there and just feel for it. Okay, I can feel it protruding just a little bit, so I'm going to back off. And I'm going to check it to make sure that it's not sticking up too far so that the shock mount will seat appropriately. So there's one. And this one we probably won't see the results. It's just a little pinhole, but a hole nonetheless. So I'll put my little piece of cardboard dam material in there and push it in with the screw. And here I'll feel for it again. As soon as it starts to protrude, I'll back down and make sure I push the dam back with it. Okay, that feels good. And yeah, there we go. It's nice and smooth now, but just check it. Make sure that there's not a high spot there that might prevent the shock mount from seating appropriately. Okay, so let me just put these aside for a minute. All right, back to the base. So I use this base quite a bit as my installation jig, and I put all four on at the same time. I know some websites recommend one at a time, others all four. I'm in the all four camp. But let's look at this piece. The hole from the factory is 3/8 of an inch. The fastener that's used is 1/4 of an inch, so we've got quite a bit of play here that could cause misalignment if we don't address it. What I like to do is I take some simple vinyl tubing with 1/4 inch in diameter. You can buy it at any hardware store. It's cheap, $1 a foot, something like that. And I'll cut off 4 pieces 7/16 of an inch long. That's a good number, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'll take the little piece of tubing, push it in from the top. I'll take my fastener, come up from the bottom, and seat it all the way. And now I've filled the hole, and I don't have the slack anymore. Then I'll take my shock mount and I'll screw it down onto the fastener, and I'll screw it till it bottoms out on the tubing. That's a good thing. This tubing is sticking up a little tiny bit, and it'll bottom out, and you can see the gap in here, just a small one, and what that gap allows is some movement of the shock mount. It can't go anywhere side to side or up and down, but it is allowed to pivot just a little bit, which will make a big difference in how it seats on the base of the chair. So let me put the rest of these in. There we go. Okay, now my mounts are in place. Now, this is something that can't be overlooked. I think when I hear other people with chair failure, it's because they don't take enough time for this next step. And again, a very important step. That's the acetone. So, back on with the rubber glove. And my rag. And I'm going to carefully but thoroughly wipe down my shock mounts. Get them good. Okay, now I'm going to locate where the shock mounts need to go. So this is a dry fit, and I'm looking for clues. I have my original reference lines here, but I also now see the plateau that the original shock mounts were sitting on. So I'm seeing about a 3/8 of an inch difference between the edge of the plateau and this shock mount, and just about the same over here, and it's not too far off from my reference lines. But I think I need to twist it just a little. Now let me check the back. We have these plateaus here, positions. And so want to see about a finger's width between each of these. That looks pretty good. Not too much of a change up here. Okay, it looks like pretty good positioning. So, take a Sharpie. I'm going to draw a ring around them. now I have a target. Okay, just set my base off to the side, and yes, it does look like it's pretty well centered. Okay, now it's time to actually prepare the glue, and I'm going to use the JB Quick Weld. I got the idea from the ChairFag website. I know JB Weld products, and this is they're good, and this is just the quick version. Sets up in about 10 minutes. You can walk away from this in about 10 minutes, and then it'll cure over the next several hours. You don't need a lot. This is a 2-ounce package, 1 ounce each of the tubes. I can get 4 chairs out of each package, so it's about $6 a package. That's $1.50 a chair. Okay, there's my scrap of cardboard for mixing, and here's my mixing paddle, and I just cut up old hacksaw blades. They stay nice and stiff, so I have good control. They're essentially free if you have an old hacksaw blade, and I just cut about a 3-inch piece, and they're reusable to a point, and I can get a couple more uses out of this. Alright, here's the JB Weld, and I'll put on one part first. Kind of a stiff batch here. And a little more. Okay, it looks like enough. I don't know how to describe that. It's a little bigger than a nickel. It's about a 1/4 of an inch pile high. So let me put in the other part. And again, it's 50-50, so I want to make these piles look similar. All right, that looks good. Okay, now mix it up, and you really can't over mix. Well, you don't want to run the clock out by taking too long, but as far as getting the mix correct, just keep working it. It should turn to a kind of a neutral charcoal gray. And roll it out. Scrape the cardboard. You shouldn't see any more of that light gray or black anymore. You should have rolled it all into the mixture. Okay, I think that's about as good as it's going to get. Alright, so I'm going to put a dollop about the size of a nickel on each one of these. It's about a 1/4 inch pile there too. Whoop. Any stray cleans up pretty easily with acetone. There. The black Sharpie line, which is in such high contrast to this yellow chair, will pretty much disappear when the epoxy oozes out. Now, this one had a little crater from where the original shock mount pulled away. So I want to make sure I get some in that crater, you know, and really fill it up. And then of course an appropriate amount above in the crater. Okay, I think we've got it. Okay, now it's time to mount the base, and I'm just going to go for my target. And gently push down. You should see the epoxy ooze out all the way around. And massage it just a little bit. Okay, and now checking my landmarks. Look pretty good over here and here. So I'm starting to lose sight of my Sharpie marks. Okay, the relationship between these back mounts and those plateaus look good. And I think now we just hold on. You're going to need to hold this for a good 6 or 8 minutes. And be mindful that it's not drifting anywhere one way or the other. And we'll come back. Okay, it's at about an hour, and it's really not ready to go. I actually let them cure overnight. The package says 4 hours, but I don't need to do anything with it right away, except for take my base jig off so I can work on the next one. So I let it sit an hour before I do that. And once the everything is cured, then I will wash everything down and touch up any rough spots here and there, and if necessary use some sealer. But I find that in most cases, just a good washing. I use this to wash it, Durtex cleaner. You mix it in a bucket of warm water, and it cuts just about everything. It's a wall washer, floor washer, but it works real good on grime and everything else that's associated with these seats. Even soften the gum a little bit. So now it just gets put off to the side for cleaning and final assembly. So I hope you found this was informative, and good luck.